I was 12 when it happened. We had just moved into a small town in Oregon, and I was still getting used to my new room. That night, I was taking inventory of my marble collection when my tigers I rolled off my desk and disappeared under the bed. Without hesitation, I reached underneath, feeling around blindly in the dark. That's when my fingers met hers. At 12, the only hands I had ever held were those of my parents when I was little. But this was different. The skin was ice cold, the fingers stiff. My stomach twisted into knots as my mind caught up with reality. I yanked my hand back as if burned, scrambling away until my back hit the opposite wall. My breath came in sharp gasps. I forced myself to look. Heart pounding, I got on all fours and lowered my head to the floor. That's when I saw her eyes, two piercing, unearthly blue orbs staring straight at me from the darkness under my bed. That was the last thing I remembered before the world went black. When I woke up, my parents were hovering over me, their faces etched with concern. My older sister, Jessica, said I had let out a blood-curdling scream before collapsing. Memories rushed back, hitting me like a freight train. I sat up so fast my vision swam. "There's a body under my bed," I blurted out. Of course, my parents didn't believe me. They exchanged skeptical glances. "It was just a bad dream, Ethan," my mother said, forcing a smile. I knew what I saw. When my parents saw how hysterical I was becoming, they sighed and decided to humor me. My dad, ever the no-nonsense type, knelt down and peered under the bed. I braced myself for the inevitable scream, the sheer horror that would ripple through the house. But it never came. Instead, my parents exchanged a look of sheer annoyance. "Ethan," my dad's voice was firm, "this is ridiculous. There's nothing under there." My hands trembled. Had I imagined it? Had my mind twisted some innocent shape into a nightmare? That night, I avoided my bedroom for as long as I could. But eventually, bedtime came and I had no choice. My father's expression warned me not to argue. My legs felt like lead as I stepped through the doorway. Everything looked normal. I hesitated, waiting for that cold, suffocating dread to return, but nothing happened. The air smelled of fresh laundry and dust. Maybe it really was my imagination. The relief hit me in a wave, and exhaustion soon followed. I changed into my pajamas, climbed into bed, and, against all odds, drifted off to sleep. But sleep was no escape. I dreamt of those blue eyes, of hands grasping at me from the dark. In my nightmares, I ran through endless streets, people reaching for me, their faces twisted in agony. I didn't understand what they wanted. I didn't know how to help them. I woke up in a cold sweat, the room cloaked in darkness. The clock on my nightstand read 3:12 a.m. Something felt wrong. I lay there for what felt like hours, trying to convince myself it had all been a dream. But deep down, I knew. I had to look. Heart hammering, I reached into my nightstand drawer, fumbling for my flashlight. My fingers wrapped around it, and I gave it a hard smack before flipping it on. A beam of light cut through the darkness. Slowly, I crawled to the edge of the bed and lowered myself to the floor. I took a deep breath. Then, with shaking hands, I aimed the flashlight under the bed. She was still there, the same blue-eyed woman, the same vacant, terrified expression. But now I could see more. Her limbs were twisted at impossible angles, her dress soaked in dark, dried blood. Deep gashes marred her pale skin, and her mouth was slightly open, frozen in a silent scream. But she didn't move. She just stared. For what felt like an eternity, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. Every cell in my body screamed for me to run, but I was paralyzed by sheer terror. My mind whispered one horrifying thought. She's been here this whole time. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating. Somehow, I made it back onto my bed. I wanted to scream for my parents, to run out of that room and never look back. But I didn't, because deep down I knew they wouldn't believe me. I lay there for hours, silent tears rolling down my face, whispering to the universe, "Why me? And worse, how was I supposed to fix this?" That morning, I woke up feeling like death itself. My eyes were crusted over from dried tears. My head pounded from exhaustion, and every muscle in my body felt stiff from how tense I had been all night. Sunlight streamed through my window, bathing the room in warmth, but it did nothing to chase away the chill in my bones. Dragging myself to the kitchen, I mumbled a half-hearted greeting to my family. My mother, busy flipping pancakes, gave a distracted "good morning" without even glancing at me. It wasn't until my father's sharp voice cut through the morning hum that I realized something was wrong. "What the hell happened to your face?" All conversation halted. My mother turned, spatula in hand, her brows furrowing in concern. "Ethan, your eyes," she frowned. "They're all swollen and, God, honey, they're so red." Before I could answer, my sister, Jessica, smirked over her plate of toast. "Looks like someone got run over by a garbage truck." Dad shot her a warning glare, and she stifled a laugh behind her juice glass. Without thinking, I blurted out it was the woman under my bed. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Instantly, my father's face hardened. "Enough," he snapped. "But I saw." I said, "Enough." His voice was final, brooking no argument. My father was a man who did not tolerate nonsense. He had made up his mind the night before, and once he'd decided something, there were no appeals. The air in the kitchen turned heavy. No one spoke. The scrape of a knife against toast, the sizzle of bacon, the clinking of a fork on a plate. Those were the only sounds that filled the silence. Everyone returned to their morning routine, acting as if nothing had happened. But I knew better. I knew what I had seen, and if my father wasn't going to listen, then I'd find someone who would. At school, I waited until lunch before pulling my best friend, Joey, aside. Joey had been my closest friend since kindergarten. He was the kind of kid who lived for the supernatural, UFOs, Bigfoot, ghosts, you name it. While most kids our age obsessed over baseball or action figures, Joey had spent the past year trying to convince me that our school was built on an ancient burial ground. So when I told him what had happened, he didn't laugh. He didn't even hesitate. "Dude," he breathed, eyes wide. "She's gotta be some kind of ghost." He rubbed his chin as if he had an actual beard to stroke. "A spirit. A lost soul, trapped between realms." I swallowed hard, but I felt her hand. Joey nodded sagely. "Not all ghosts are like misty and transparent. Some are stronger, more real." The thought sent a shiver down my spine. "If she's stuck here, that means she needs something," Joey continued, eyes gleaming with excitement. "Maybe she died in your house. Maybe she was murdered." I flinched. The image of her twisted, bloodied body flashed through my mind. "And maybe you're the only one who can help her move on." I didn't like the sound of that. Up until last night, my biggest worries had revolved around Pokemon cards and beating the next level in my favorite video game. I wasn't equipped to handle something like this. What if she doesn't want to move on? I asked hesitantly. Joey blinked. Then, well, maybe she's stuck for another reason? The thought didn't make me feel any better. I stared at my half-eaten sandwich, my stomach churning. What if she tries to hurt me? Joey shrugged. You could get a priest. Or a Ouija board. I nearly choked. A what? A Ouija board, he repeated, grinning. To, talk to her. I imagined myself sitting on the floor of my bedroom, fingers trembling on a planchette, spelling out words from beyond the grave. Yeah. Not happening. My parents would never let me get one of those. Joey snorted. So don't tell them. I frowned. You think I should try to communicate with her? Joey leaned in, his expression serious. Ethan, whatever she is, she's choosing to appear to you. That means she wants something from you. The words sent a chill straight through me. I didn't want her to want something from me. I wanted her to go away. But deep down, I already knew the truth. She wasn't going away. And sooner or later, I was going to have to face her again. The questions swirled in my head for the rest of the day, refusing to settle. What did she want? Why was she still here? What was I supposed to do? By the time I got home from school, the house was silent, the kind of quiet that seeps into your bones and makes you feel like you're not really alone. I was always the first one home. Both of my parents worked late, and my sister, Ashley, had cheer practice most afternoons. Usually, I'd grab a snack, watch TV for 30 minutes, then start my homework. My chores had to be done before my parents got back. Dad always checked. But today, none of that mattered. I had a mission. Steeling myself, I walked into my room and stood by my bed, forcing confidence into my stance. If I was going to figure this out, I had to see her again. I had to understand why she was still here. I counted down from 10. Then, with a deep breath, I dropped to my knees and peered under the bed. All the bravado I had moments before evaporated in an instant. She was still there. Her body was twisted in the same unnatural position, frozen in that sickeningly helpless state. But now she looked worse. Her once pale skin had turned a sickly gray, dull and lifeless. Some places sagged as if the flesh was beginning to slide off her bones, while others were pulled so tight it looked like her skull was trying to burst through. Her face, God, her face. The skin there had stretched, hollowing out her cheeks and making her wide, terrified eyes appear even larger. And then the smell hit me. It was rancid, thick, heavy, clinging to the back of my throat. I had smelled decay before. Dead squirrels in the woods, birds that had been picked apart by ants. But this was worse. Human rot. It had a putrid sweetness to it, like something sickly trying to disguise itself as normal. My stomach twisted violently. I barely made it to the bathroom before I collapsed in front of the toilet, heaving up my lunch. I had done none of my chores, hadn't touched my homework. I hadn't even gone back into my room. I could still smell her, even from the hallway. It was seeping out through the gap at the bottom of the door, like the room itself was rotting. I can't go in there. She's getting worse, Ashley sighed, rolling her eyes. Oh my God. Ethan, you have to let this go. There's nothing under your bed. I shook my head. I saw her. She's decaying. She groaned, throwing up her hands. All right, that's it. I'm proving this to you right now. Before I could stop her, she turned and strode toward my bedroom door. Panic surged through me. I lunged, blocking the doorway with my arms spread wide. No, I pleaded, my voice breaking. Please, don't open it. She hesitated. I could see it then, the moment her frustration turned into something else. Concern. She glanced at the door, at the way I was pressing myself against it like it was the only thing keeping something from getting out. She hesitated again. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Our parents got home sometime after 6. We didn't have a family car. Dad used his work truck to drop off and pick up Mom. Sometimes, if he had a far-off job, she'd catch a ride home with a coworker. Those trips were blessings because when Dad wasn't home, there was no tension, no walking on eggshells, no fear. Unfortunately, today was not one of those days. I knew what was coming. I had barely stepped into the hallway before Dad's eyes locked onto me. I opened my mouth, trying to explain everything before he could explode. The smell, the rotting skin, her eyes. His expression twisted into something dark. "Enough of this bullshit," he muttered, his voice tight with irritation. "You are done with this nonsense. Come with me," he ordered, dragging me down the hall. I stumbled after him, my heart pounding. "Dad, please, you don't understand." "Oh, I understand just fine," he snapped. "You need to stop acting like an idiot. And I need to prove to you how full of shit you are." My room loomed ahead, the door still shut. Dad yanked it open. The smell hit him immediately. He hesitated just slightly, his nose wrinkling. But his anger won out. With a growl of frustration, he released my arm and stormed into my room. "There is nothing in here," he bellowed. "No ghosts, no bodies, no damn smell. Just a spoiled little boy wasting my goddamn time." His fury boiled over. Before I could react, he bent down, gripped the frame of my bed, and flipped it. The entire thing crashed against the wall with a deafening bang. I flinched. My heart stopped. And then, nothing. No body. No blood. No rotting corpse with ocean blue eyes. Just dust and shadows. I knew what I had seen. I knew she had been there. So where was she now? Through the chaos, the yelling, my own choked sobs, the bile burning my throat, I could still see her. Even as my father's furious face hovered inches from mine, even as his fingers dug into my arm, her decaying body remained there, twisted in its grotesque final pose. How could he not see her? How could he not smell her? Then he shoved me backward, turned on his heel, and stormed out, leaving my overturned bed against the wall. For the rest of the evening, the house was silent. It always was after one of Dad's episodes. We hadn't spoken for 2 days the first time he shattered a television in a fit of rage. This was no different. Mom busied herself in the kitchen. Ashley stayed locked in her room, and I sat alone, trying to hold myself together. My father and I had never been close. And now, sitting in the darkness of my ruined bedroom, the suffocating stench of death clinging to the air, I understood something terrible. The rotting girl under my bed wasn't the scariest thing in my life. My father was. That night, I got no sleep. When my stomach was empty and the nausea finally dulled, the tears took over. I sobbed until exhaustion pulled me under, only to be ripped back into nightmares. She was there. She was always there. Her face lurked in every shadow. Those vacant, terrified eyes staring at me burned into the backs of my eyelids. And when I woke up, soaked in sweat and tears, my body trembling, it all started over again. This became my new routine. Tossing, gagging, crying. Every morning, I dragged myself through school, a hollow-eyed shell of myself. Everyone noticed, but no one dared ask. No one wanted to risk angering my father. And every night, as exhaustion ate away at me, I would check on her. She was deteriorating faster now. Her flesh sagged in places, exposing patches of bone and dark, rotting sinew. Her fingers curled inward as if clawing at nothing. The smell was unbearable, a putrid mix of death and something worse. Something ancient, something that didn't belong in this world. At some point, I wondered if she would simply wither away, if she would decay into nothing and disappear, if I would wake up one morning and she would be gone. But she wasn't gone. She was waiting. I wasn't just seeing her face anymore. I saw her running, not jogging, fleeing. She tore through the woods, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Branches clawed at her arms and legs, slicing her skin. She kept glancing over her shoulder. Something was chasing her, and I could feel her fear. Clawed its way into my chest, became my fear. It was the kind of terror I had only ever seen in one place before. In my mother's eyes when my father was on a rampage. In Ashley's hands when they shook under the dinner table, her nails digging into her palms. In my own reflection, when I stared at myself too long in the bathroom mirror, wondering if tonight would be the night he snapped for good. I didn't know who or what was chasing her, but I knew, deep in my bones, that she would not escape. The nightmares worsened. Each night, the scene replayed, but each time, her pursuer got closer, until one night it caught her. I won't describe what happened next. Even in a dream, it was too real, too horrific. I woke up screaming, clawing at my sweat-soaked sheets, the phantom echoes of her cries still ringing in my ears. And then I realized she had chosen me. This woman, this thing under my bed, had chosen to show me this. But why? What was I supposed to do? I started searching. I checked every local news site, scanning for missing persons, unsolved murders, anything that might match her description. But I found nothing. Nothing except the ever-growing certainty that if this didn't end soon, I wouldn't survive it. Every day, my body weakened. My hands trembled when I tried to write. My vision blurred from exhaustion. My reflection in the mirror became something unrecognizable, gaunt, hollow-eyed, a living corpse. My mother knew something was wrong. I could see it in the way she looked at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. But she wouldn't say anything. She couldn't. One sharp glance from my father could make even the strongest man shrink. My mother was small and meek. She did what she was told, at least to his face. Many nights, I was supposed to be punished. Left without dinner, locked in my room to think about my actions. But sometime after midnight, when the house was silent and my father was deep in sleep, she would slip into the kitchen, and she would leave a plate of food outside my door. She saved me, in more ways than one, but not even she could save me from this. After what felt like years of torment, it all ended on an ordinary, bright, sunny day. I hadn't checked on her in a while. There was no need. By the last time I looked, she was little more than a skeletal husk. The flesh had nearly melted away, leaving behind a fragile, crumbling frame. The only thing that hadn't changed, hadn't rotted, were her eyes. Those unnatural, ocean blue eyes that never faded, never dulled. And so, when I finally built up the courage to look again, I braced myself for that gaze. But when I peered under the bed, all I saw was a water bottle, a pair of socks, and an old baseball mitt. She was gone. For a moment, relief flooded through me, but it didn't last, because beneath that relief, deeper than the exhaustion that had plagued me for weeks, there was something else. Grief. I had known she was real. I had felt her cold, decaying skin. I had smelled the stench of death filling my room. And now, without a trace, she had vanished. No proof, no explanation. She had suffered something beyond comprehension. And no matter how horrifying it had been to witness, she had shared it with me. Why? The thought that haunted me most wasn't that she had been under my bed all that time. It was that she had needed me, and now she was gone. I wasn't religious. My family wasn't either. I prayed that she had found peace. But as the hours passed, the sadness I felt began to morph into something else. Anxiety started as a small, nagging unease, a shiver that ran down my spine for no reason, a vague sense of being watched even in a crowded room. By the time lunch rolled around, my skin was crawling. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. And then, shortly after the lunch period, my day, my life, took a turn I never expected. The moment my principal, Mr. Cash, stepped into my classroom and called my name, my stomach dropped. I wasn't exactly a model student, but I had never been in serious trouble before. Not once. As we walked down the eerily quiet hallway, my mind raced through every possible thing I could have done wrong. Had I forgotten to turn in an assignment? Had someone accused me of something? It wasn't until he opened the office door and I saw Ashley's tear-streaked face that I knew. This wasn't about me. Something was wrong. Mr. Cash, a man usually full of warmth, had an expression like carved stone. His voice was somber. "There's been an incident," he said. "Your aunt is on her way to pick you up." Ashley let out a strangled sob. I felt my throat tighten. "Why isn't Mom coming to get us?" My voice wavered. "Are they hurt?" I hesitated, my blood running cold. Did Dad hurt her?" Mr. Cash's lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. Instead, he placed a firm hand on my shoulder, squeezed it once, and then left the room. The silence between my sisters' muffled cries was deafening. Inside my chest, my heart pounded like a war drum. The sound grew louder, a dull, relentless thump, 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 until it became a high-pitched ringing in my ears. The door swung open. Our aunt stood there, her face tight with forced composure. She didn't say much, just that our parents weren't physically hurt, but something had happened, and Mom, Ashley, and I would be staying with her for the foreseeable future. No further explanations, no reassurances, nothing but a vague, heavy dread that settled deep in my bones. A father's sin. When we arrived at our aunt's house, Mom was already there. She sat motionless on the couch, eyes red and puffy, her face eerily blank. She looked hollow, drained of something vital. But when she saw us, her arms flew open, and we collapsed into her. I still didn't know what had happened, but in that moment, I didn't care. I just wanted my mother. After what felt like forever, we finally pulled apart, each taking a seat on either side of her. Her hands gripped ours tightly, her fingers trembling. She took a deep breath, looked between us, and said, "Your father did a very, very bad thing, and he won't be coming home anytime soon. If ever." Her voice cracked, and my stomach clenched. Then she told us, our father, had murdered a woman in the next state over during one of his so-called work trips. Ashley let out a strangled gasp, covering her mouth with both hands. My body turned to ice. Mom spared us the gruesome details, but she didn't need to. The weight of the revelation crushed me like a collapsing ceiling. We weren't allowed to watch TV or use the internet. She didn't want us stumbling across anything we weren't ready to see. We were going to be staying home from school for the rest of the week. Maybe longer. Any other time, a break from school would have been a dream. But this felt like hell. That night, long after everyone else had succumbed to sleep, I crept into the living room and turned on the TV. I needed to know. I flipped through the channels until I found the local news. And there she was, plastered across the screen, dressed in a jet black cap and gown, was my ghost girl. Her name was Anna Elizabeth Collins. She was 19, barely older than Ashley. The news anchor spoke in hushed tones about her tragic end. How she had fallen in with the wrong crowd. How she often hitchhiked to get around. How her body had been discovered by hikers deep in the woods. How my father's work truck matched the description of the man last seen giving her a ride. How the police had been watching him for weeks, waiting for him to slip up. How a discarded cigarette had sealed his fate. DNA. A match, not just for Anna, for 2 other missing women. My hands clenched into fists as I stared into those all too familiar blue eyes. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something other than fear. Peace. She was free now, and I knew, without a doubt, that she was finally at rest. I turned off the TV and curled up on the couch, exhaustion pulling me under like a heavy tide. For the first time in months, I didn't gag. I didn't toss and turn. I didn't wake up gasping, sweat-drenched, haunted by the horrors beneath my bed. That night, I dreamed. I was standing in my room, bathed in a soft, golden light. Anna appeared in the doorway. Not the rotting, twisted corpse I had come to fear, but the girl from the news. Whole, beautiful, alive. She stepped forward, her presence filling the room with warmth. Her lips curved into a soft smile as she reached out, placing gentle hands on my shoulders. And then, she pulled me into an embrace. I knew my life, our lives, would never be the same after this. But in that moment, held in the arms of the girl who had once haunted me, I knew we were going to be okay.